But John, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today, man.
Zach, it is such a pleasure. I love what you're doing. It's a new business model, it's innovative, and hopefully it becomes the new way of doing news, doing streaming, podcasts. You never know. Let's do it.
You really do never know, but I think that's the exciting piece of all this, right? And it's what I want to focus in on, and something I think you, since I've met you a couple years ago, have always done a phenomenal job of stressing: the professionalism in this space, restoring trust to crypto. And I feel like everybody always looks to you, and I've been watching your media appearances around all the major cable news networks talking about restoring trust in crypto. So we're going to talk about that and what Avalanche has planned in 2023 to do just that. But you're right, I think today's an exciting day because you and I have discussed for a long time what NFTs, what crypto can do in terms of tokenizing real value and real utility. And for us, that means minting a ticket into a cooperative, into a way of co-owning your favorite shows. I think we've all watched shows before and said, hey, I'm the first one to see that thing. I'm going to recommend it to my friends. But as it scales and grows an audience, I would love to enjoy in some of that upside. And that is what we're trying to do here at Coinage. But the way we do it and the way we get people excited to watch and listen to our content is have really good guests on. And so I'm excited to get to chat with you for the next hour. When we talk about not just what's coming in 2023, but also what happened in 2022, and it's been a pretty tough year for everybody in the space when we talk about trust, of course. So why don't we just kind of start with, in your mind, kind of where we're at right now. We've been hearing you talk a lot about capital markets and the way that these things go. I mean, what have you seen, I guess, over the course of this year, not just with capital markets, but I think also some really tough questions that people within crypto have had to ask themselves?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. But to set the groundwork properly in the foundation, we have to remember, though, that there is a separation between the crypto capital markets and the underlying technology, the blockchain or the crypto technology. So a lot of the trust has really been sapped out of the crypto capital markets, indirectly some out of the technology, but the technology as viewed by traditional enterprises and actually crypto native people is still very, very strong. The real damage is in the crypto capital markets. And then if you think about where most of the damage has been in the crypto capital markets, most of it is at the edge, I call, or the on-ramps, or the places that are really business models centralized, that are more like traditional business models that now allow access into crypto. Very much of the damage has been caused at that layer. And it's because of the concentrated hands of people who basically, frankly, have not imbued the spirit of Web3 in the mindset of like decentralization, like what Coinage is doing, which is letting the community be more involved with everything from governance to likes and not likes, and to help create the content and sharing itself. That's got to be mentioned. It's got to be understood. The culprits are actually concentration or decentralization, centralization as opposed to decentralization, and it's also at the crypto capital markets level, and within that, it's really mostly at the edge.
I think it's a really important point to start on, so I'm glad we kicked off there, because it is true, right? There have been a lot of reasons in 2022 to have your faith in the space, faith in the technology maybe shaken a bit. But that is, it's been a tough year for me personally, remembering all that stuff, that's why we're here, right? Is doing things that haven't been able to be done before because of tokenizing things, because of discovering value in that sense. And for us as a Web3 show, as you said, breaking down the wall between content creators and their audience to co-own in that thing itself. And to have you in the community is an honor, as I said, to have the co-founder of Netflix, a man who understands revolutionizing media and new models, to have him as a Coinage NFT holder as well. So I'd be remiss if I didn't tell people, if anyone out there watched our content this year using our free subscriber NFT, that they are already welcome to mint today on our pre-mint at coinage.media. So I would start there. But I think, I reflect on kind of our relationship, you and I, over the last 2 years, and I got to thank you for your support in helping get this off the ground. But when we talk about other things that do embody kind of Web3 ideals and what you've seen, I know Avalanche itself have seen a lot of interesting use cases, particularly I think with gaming NFTs. But what have you seen, I guess, in terms of Avalanche itself standing out from the crowd when it comes to what you guys have done as a brand, as a blockchain, to kind of also serve those ideals and prove out what it means to be an example in the Web3 media or Web3 space?
That's great. One of the missions of Avalanche has always been to tokenize the world's assets. That includes crypto native digital assets, as well as at some point when there's more mass adoption, tokenize what we call real world assets. So what Ava Labs and Avalanche has done has always been out there creating what I consider great leadership. If you look at the executive team at Ava Labs and even a lot of the leaders inside of Ava Labs, these are people who get Web3 but also have a track record of success in Web2. Some of the problems we've seen this year are really like basically what we've had is a bunch of really smart people, great technology people who want to reinvent an industry like finance but have never experienced finance firsthand. It's really hard to just come down from a meta level and say, I can make it better without having gone through the trenches. So Ava Labs has always been set up at the management level to be experienced, but also who understand both crypto as well as Web 2 or traditional financial services. And that's continued for all of 2022. We've led in certain innovations in the technology as well as building community in Web 3. But at the same time, we realize it's a long game, and we've established partnerships with traditional financial firms like Deloitte, Lemonade, MasterCard, you name it, but we've also tokenized things for KKR, one of the world-class asset management firms out there. So we've been really, both able to accomplish things in the Web3 world as well as reach out and build bridges to Web 2.
Yeah, I feel like that's been one of the exciting things to witness too, right? When we talk about onboarding and what that means in converting people who are familiar with maybe some of these centralized Web 2 behemoths, and also players like yourselves who are kind of working with those behemoths to cross over into Web 3. One of the partnerships that we saw with the Avalanche blockchain, that is Alibaba's cloud team. One of the partnerships that I think a lot of people paid attention to, there's also Google, I think, working with Solana. There are a lot of partnerships now in Web 2 and Web 3. I mean, what does that maybe say about where this space is heading when you, again, talk about the technology rather than maybe the capital markets, which we can get into maybe some of the financial tooling that works and is enabled by blockchain, but the tech side, right, and those partnerships. Why are you so excited about those?
So let's talk about Alibaba first. Alibaba, when they choose partnerships, they actually choose the first ones to go, and we were the first ones for them to have a partnership was with them. They choose based on the technology itself. So it's really a testament to have Alibaba choose Avalanche first blockchain to work with, because that means really what it really means is that technology is really innovative at Avalanche, and that consensus protocol is great, and that blockchain is fantastic. That's their number one criteria in their scorecard in terms of which partners to choose. So that was, not only was it gratifying to have a partnership with Alibaba, but it's even better to know that the way they choose was based on innovation and how great the technology was. So that's the Alibaba situation. Now, in terms of why there have been more crossover partnerships between Web 2 behemoths with general Web 3 people, I think it's very simple. You have to, the worlds are starting to merge, and you kind of have to now break it down by specific segments. If it's NFTs, I think last week Porsche announced that they were going to drop NFTs. You know what? Porsche was thinking not just like creating digital collectibles. It really was a customer acquisition tool and becomes part of their overall marketing efforts. If you think about it, you can start creating engagement, and you can start creating a fan base that allows them to learn about Porsche. It's not easy and simple to buy a Porsche car. It takes a lot of money. But there are a lot of Porsche enthusiasts who are young and on that track and will be very successful. So let's get those enthusiasts into the ecosystem now, And if you think about it, do whatever numbers you want, and only 20% of those community who have those cool Porsche NFTs, who have loyalty that get to go to some F1 event where there's a Porsche car, or they get certain hats, or et cetera, over time, if they can convert 20% of those into actually a Porsche buyer, and maybe they buy a few of those Porsches through their lifetime, those are high-end luxury products. The lifetime value, even at a 20% conversion rate, is the best CAC they ever spent. So we saw this with mobile as well. The firms back then missed a lot of mobile because they're like, oh, what is mobile? It's hard to advertise, it's tiny screen, blah, blah, blah. But all of a sudden they realize, wait, we can't get that demographic of aspirational 20 to 30-year-olds when they're ready to do something at 40 because we don't have their ear. So that's a real good example of why you're seeing these partnerships between Web 2 and Web 3. On the financial services side, where, like I said before, we help tokenize part of a KKR fund. Well, there's many reasons for it. The underlying blockchain technology simply can, first and foremost, can really decrease operational costs. I came from traditional finance. The amount of paperwork and repetitive stuff that has to be done, some of it's for regulation purposes, so it can't be eliminated, but literally the amount of back and forth workflow automation / data management stuff and communication interactions is timely, meaning it takes a lot of long time, and costly. And doing it through traditional siloed servers where you have APIs plugged in and you have to use SaaS or other type of software to connect, it's not the way you would build it if you started today. You would build it on a shared distributed ledger, and you can save tons of money. So that's another example why Web 2 and Web.
That's exactly kind of the core concept for us too, right? It's like cooperatives themselves have been around for decades here in the US, and it's a recognized and legal structure.
I'm sure a lot of your fans here have been to Burning Man. You guys all show up, everyone has some sort of thing they do, and no one thinks about anything, but at the end you all have a better shared experience and have a voice in how whatever experience you want to create at Burning Man happens.
Yeah, I've never thought about Coinage being the Burning Man of crypto media, but I do like
Coinage
the
is
phrasing.
not the Burning Man of crypto. I think with Coinage, actually, I have to give you a credit here, Zach, is you mentioned Netflix. And, I know Netflix very well. My prior career, I was a tech investor. I love innovation, as you know, and I love always exploring things. The thing that Netflix really impresses me about is that they're one of the few firms that actually is willing to disintermediate themselves for the next innovative thing. People on this call may not realize, but Netflix wasn't the leading streaming company back in the day. They were selling and shipping DVDs. And they had a ridiculously good cash flow generating business. And yet, before the gig was up, they disintermediated themselves, took the hit, and went into streaming before streaming was really capable. That's you, Zach. You have an unbelievable career in traditional broadcasting, and you said, I want to go for tomorrow and focus on tomorrow, not just today.
Hey, that is true, and it is risky, and I appreciate you saying that just because, there is a new model out there. I think Web3 has attached and unlocked all kinds of possibilities, and the idea of co-owning media with a creator, to me, even beyond Coinage, right? And that's kind of what we're exploring, is this is the first community-owned show, and what does that look like? And how does it scale? If you think about Kickstarter and Patreon, that model has existed, right? Yeah. But they don't often unlock any ownership beyond maybe supporting the creator. But in this model, you can build something with the creator. That wall between creator and audience comes down. It helps scale getting good guests such as yourself to come on. It helps scale getting good stories because the newsroom in itself becomes decentralized. It aligns the incentives between people watching the content and the people creating it to make the best show possible. And I do think it is an exciting experiment, but again, having supporters like you makes it a lot more manageable when we're kind of getting off the ground here. And I want to remind everybody right now, we're actually, since this is finally launch day, we've opened up our competition, our little giveaway, our raffle for people who are listening to just retweet the thing that we have posted pinned on our top of our account, Coinage Media, to join that before our January 2nd New Year, new drop, baby, as we've been saying over here, to let people co-own it with us. But yeah, John, I think that's a really good point because I feel like, it's such a new technology. What for you, when you were kind of like thinking about crossing over, made you want to take the leap from the old traditional tech world into this? If there was a specific example for me, I mean, I saw Constitution DAO launch last year, and everyone was laughing about it, right? The idea of raising money to buy the Constitution, how crazy is that? And it clicks. No, I mean, if you can create people with a shared, like a community with a shared mission, and put your funds together to make it happen, there's an enormous power in that. So I don't know if there was something for you that kind of clicked when you were thinking about maybe making the leap.
There were two things that clicked. I'll be transparent. During 2013, when Bitcoin was actually on a skyrocket, seems so low compared to where it is today, but when 2013 was a bull market in crypto, I frankly was a skeptic, and I really actually dismissed it. And then, but the nature, every fiber of me is to always look at new things and give it a real hard look. And then after Mt. Gox in 2014, I said, you know what? Okay, now it's time. It's not this straight, up to the right type of chart on Bitcoin. At that point, it had crashed already. I said, listen, let's do some real work. Let's figure this out. I went to a whole bunch of meetups. Frankly, going to these meetups, I was not convinced. In fact, if anything, I was like, whoa, these people here are a little bit out there. So, in fact, it may even push me slightly away from it. What really convinced me to start buying some Bitcoin, frankly, was that I had to change my mindset as to what this thing was about from an economic perspective. And coming from traditional finance, running and buying and investing in tech companies, I was constantly thinking everything as a going concern enterprise and trying to think about how do I DCF this thing, what's the moats in this business, what's the how's the margins in this business, how does it work, et cetera, what's the utility. But then I thought, wait, this is the wrong idea. I mean, this is a community-owned thing. There is no enterprise that owns this thing. This is actually more like a mini economy, a micro economy, where everyone gets a shared percentage of value. So I started looking at it more like it's a GDP of a small country. In other words, looking at it more like a foreign exchange currency, or looking at it as a commodity. And then when I I knew, but then when I did the math that, listen, there's a fixed number of Bitcoin. I think at that time, it's like, high 14, 15 million Bitcoins were mined already. And you can do the math as to, on a per day basis, how many Bitcoins are gonna be unearthed, the incremental supply. And then the price was low back then, a couple $100. And I was like, okay, fine. It's like, literally, it was like 1 million to 1.5 million of new supply a day. And we were looking at wallets, we're looking at addresses being formed. And if you look at any of those metrics and use conservative assumptions of assets on address or wallet, it was like, wait, there is far more incremental demand than there is incremental supply. And that's when I said, I've got to be an investor in this stuff, at least. The second aha time and moment was more like in 2016, 17. It was more like 17 when the ICO boom happened. And then all of a sudden, that took me to another level. Like, I want to be an operator in this space, because I was like, whoa, if this was done well. I was just shocked at how much money was raised, how quickly and how efficiently a global crowdfund could be. And I've invested in my share of IPOs, I've invested in private companies, I know the process, I know the dark component show, how long it takes. The price discovery is poor because Goldman Sachs takes you around and asks all these hedge funds, what would you pay, very manual. And I was like, wow, this could be a much better mechanism, but it's got to be done in a compliant way. And then I became CEO of the digital assets group at Shares Post, trying to create a security token marketplace. I ended up actually making everything very compliant and functional, but commercially the market wasn't there. And I did the math with my tech team. Ethereum was not scalable enough at the time that if I were to do an IPO type of event and mint all these tokens, I might as well just go on a roadshow with Goldman Sachs and pay them 6% of the IPO.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, that's
how I got into this, Zach. First, it was an investor, and second aha moment was I want to be part of an industry that can transform my original industry and also provide more access to these hard-to-find private securities and alternative assets to the masses.
I think that's a really good point because I actually remember before we launched Coinage, the discussion with you around other things out there that exist as far as crowdfunding goes, and you mentioned IPOs and the way that those work in terms of most people are locked out right until after the shares list, and then you can buy in on IPO day. And I've seen how this works, right? At CNBC and Yahoo, there's a lot of coverage, a lot of hype. People get excited. You come in after all the fat cats do, and then retail's mostly stuck there, with the worst price in that allocation. And the options in crypto, which we both agree, I think, as people who came from the old system here, regulations needed, which is why we've structured ours as a legal cooperative in Colorado. But the ability for people to see cool projects and get in without some of those rules that existed, to where you have to have a super high net worth to even access some of these things, which is exciting, right? With this, it's okay.
The point here is actually, that's a great point, Zach, because those rules, there's a purpose. Okay, let's not dismiss all the rules. It's for customer protection and consumer protection, and frankly, given the recent events, you need some sort of protection for people. But your point, I think, is the way the system has been set up, even though it was done with good intent, has led to a pragmatic result of where the insiders, the big boys, get to sell to the individuals, retail, who pay the worst price for something. And that's a de facto result of how the system's set up, how people get educated about new things. The great thing, another thing, frankly, that attracted me to this industry was, frankly, this is the first, call it, marketplace asset class where retail led institutions. This is the first marketplace where the retail sold to the institutional people. Institutions were not here in the previous summer, if you will. 2017, 2018, it was crypto native people. And it was not until really late 2021 that, I'm an operator. I talk to everyone. I have traditional finance friends and VC and hedge funds. I can tell you, from my own personal experience that the interest in the buying and the real interest in this from institutions wasn't until mid 2021. So I was kind of chuckling to myself. So the people, the individuals, were the ones that led the institutions. No other system have I ever seen where the front of the line and the first early people who pay the lower price were people, retail, as opposed to institution.
Yeah, I think, I remember we were at the Harvard Blockchain Conference earlier this year, and maybe that was a top signal, seeing so many people in suits and ties being interested in crypto. That could have been a potential warning sign. But I mean, when you think about that, right, coming from the old system, and you're right to point out, this year has been the case that I think some of those people, institutions, maybe saw some of the problems and warning signs sooner. So maybe they got in later, but they also got out first. I mean, when you compare the system around, the regulatory front, obviously, as you point out, there's a lot of things that need to be fixed here. When you look at that, right, we just saw Kevin O'Leary kind of talking to Capitol Hill yesterday, raising some issues with a lot of the system itself and saying it needs to be regulated, It's hard and it's tricky to figure out what's right when you ask those questions. So, I mean, when you see it, if you want to protect access and transparency for people who have been locked out of really good deals in the past, but you also want to protect them in the sense that they shouldn't be privy to getting, rug pulled or scammed. I mean, how do you do that is the thing that I've been struggling with as kind of someone who also came from the old system but wants to see the new system thrive and not have it be regulated away. I mean, it's a really tough question. I don't know how you've thought about it.
Well, I can tell you one thing for sure. If me, you, and the people on this Twitter Spaces can answer that question, it would have already been done. It is going to be a process, and the solution at the end will not be perfect. But it will get better. My efforts, I like to think at least that my efforts when I was trying to create a regulated security token marketplace as Shares Post and talking to Washington, not just me, again, I was a tiny part of this, but has increased Reg CF, which is a compliant way to allow people to buy, non-accredited people to buy into private securities, has already increased from 1.1 million to 5 million.
Yep.
There's other regs that allow individuals to get into this stuff, and those limits have also increased. So there has been movement. It's going to be evolutionary. There's not going to be a revolutionary like event that just ends it. So frankly, Zach, it's getting better. It's nowhere near there, and it's only going to happen over time. And the system at the end is not going to be perfect, but people will have more access. They're already getting more access, as evidenced by Reg CF going from 1 to 5 million.
Yeah, just to clarify that point, when we talk about Reg CF, for the people who might not have heard that before, and I didn't hear it before until you and I talked when I was thinking about starting Coinage, is that you can raise money from non-accredited investors up to $5 million. As you're saying, that limit was increased. We chose to go a different route because we didn't know exactly how much we'd raise, and the mint's now open, so we will see exactly how much comes in through this. But it gives creators, I suppose, the option, right, in terms of tokenizing some of the value of their show that they want to co-own with their fans or audience. And yeah, I think it has been interesting to see some of those limits raised, trying to protect access while also not having anyone be scammed. I suppose we'll see how the justice side of all this plays out since some of these collapses have happened as well. But I don't want to focus too much on that. So there is stuff that I want to turn to when it comes to kind of how Avalanche fits into this greater ecosystem and what you see as maybe, the opportunities and how Avalanche differentiates itself from some other competitors. I remember when we talked back at Bitcoin Miami 2021, I had used the term ETH killer with you, and you might have been the first person who I've ever used that term around who said, well, hold up now, we're not exactly an ETH killer. And now we've heard that from, the same thing from Solana. Anatoly Yakovenko came in here into our studio in Brooklyn, and we asked him about that same question. And his response was pretty interesting, where it's like all these communities, as you said, kind of share in the value of growing their own communities. So there is that piece. There's always going to be, I suppose, the other chains killer out there. But how do you view, I guess, Avalanche in the sense of not just being an Ethereum killer, but being its own community enabler, and maybe where you're trying to find the opportunities that Avalanche can I guess, outcompete other blockchains?
So go back to the first point about the Solana and others are finally saying that, not necessarily about ETH killing and more about growing the whole TAM, if you will. Just like with the Reg CF, I like to hope and think that my little small part in that and proselytizing that view has helped change some people's minds. So I want to take a little credit there and recognition. I'm glad other people are coming around to being a little less tribal and realizing that we probably have less than 1 million, hundreds of thousands of real developers in this space. There's, I'm not kidding, 30 million web developers, 9, 10 million Android developers, and 3 or 4 million iOS developers. Let's work on giving those developers the understanding to come to Web3 and start developing here. So that's great. Now, where's Avalanche in this process and Ava Labs in this process? I talked about our mission, where we want to go. Frankly, some of the competitive advantages always stem from the technology, and then is what you do with the technology and what businesses you can, business relationships you can develop from that technology. Avalanche has always had a few distinguishing competitive advantages, if you will. One is it starts at the consensus protocol. It's a different type of protocol versus the classical or the Nakamoto one. It's a random sampling. We don't have to go into the details here, but the benefit of that is actually instant finality. Settlement and payment happens at the same time. That is a huge advantage when you have to have value being transferred. And who wants to, figure out that their assets were not there a day or 2 or 3 or 30 days later in their credit card? When you go pay a restaurant money for the food you ate, the reason why it's a 2.5% charge to the restaurant is because, people take VIGs out of this, and part of that is for insurance, just in case the person who went to the restaurant can't pay. So that's a huge advantage when you're moving value around. So that's a logical reason as to why Avalanche in 2021 became a strong leader in decentralized finance, and it's also a great anecdote to why the institutional financial players love talking to Ava Labs Avalanche. In 2023, we're getting into a little bit forward. Ava Labs Avalanche always prides itself on innovative technology. actually, frankly, innovation at all parts of the firm. You know, tech speaks for itself in terms of the innovation, how business deals are done, how marketing is done, how products develop, even internal or corporate stuff, how we do financial accounting. You can't be innovative there, but you need to be compliant, and that in itself in this space seems like today is very innovative, given recent years. So, so we pride ourselves on innovation, and we are very excited right now for 2023 with what we call the sub-network. And the easiest way to think about that is it's really blockchain as a service for application developers. It's an app chain, if you will. You know, these gaming companies that had such success in 2021, they had to build a full stack. And we've seen that when you do that, unfortunately, your core competencies here, acquiring customers, making a great game, and getting that going, why do you need to worry about hacking at the bridges or things happening at the low level? Let's split that up, give it to someone else to do. So at Ava Labs, Avalanche, you've already, I think we have 4 or 5 live subnets going already, and we have over 100 on the test net. And in 2023, you're going to see an explosion of all the subnets or blockchain as a service or app chains, and that's what I'm super excited about.
Yeah, I think it's been fascinating to see all these different blockchains and their communities, you know, work on solutions to a problem, right? Scaling this, how do you scale it? And as you say, how do you let people like stick to their core competency and handle everything else? You know, Solana's got their solutions, you guys have yours. It's been fascinating to watch them kind of hit the market and compete publicly, right? Everyone can see all the stuff, and we talked about this before, everyone can see where funds flow and let the market decide, basically. And it's been super exciting to get to chat with you and him and all the other builders in the space to kind of propose and explain how their solution best solves the problem. And you mentioned things being too tribal. I feel like that happens all the time. If there's one thing that Coinage can do, and if we've done this, I would go to bed happy, I'd feel good, is if we can kind of bring these communities together to kind of complement each other more and say, yeah, you know what, these are real people working on real problems. And so, I don't know, that's always been exciting to hear. I think when you see what happened in 2022, right, and you think about this being too tribal, there is a potential, I don't know how closely you've been following the news, but the idea that people tried to take down projects, shorted some of this stuff, and then maneuvered some of this stuff to maybe take down pegs, as we saw earlier, whatever it may be. I mean, have you thought about how maybe this space is too tribal? Some of the toxicity in it when it comes to that piece, and maybe if it's no different than the sharks out there in normal traditional finance, as you said, you got experience with that as well.
Well, in traditional finance, when people are shorting stocks and when people are doing those types of things, because it's been around for long enough, everyone is aware of it and is, you know, you have to provision for that possibility because, you know, it's a more mature market. So that's one layer of defense. And the second layer of defense is actually, because it's been around for a long time, there's a protocol on how you do it if you did do that. So the issue in Web3 is maybe too much of it, hopefully less of it going forward, as you highlighted before. And listen, you're trying to ask me a question, how do you solve human nature? And you're not going to solve it completely, but as this space more matures, it'll just be like traditional finance where like there's enough awareness of it, so you do protection, you create protection, and also there's an appropriate and an inappropriate way of doing it. You know, I played a little baseball in college, and that was my sport. And you know, when I played, if you did certain things, like a batter who hits a home run shows up the pitcher by walking around the bases too slowly or flipping a bat, basically the next batter up was going to get a 90-mile-an-hour fastball at their head. So you endanger your own teammate, and it's basically self-policing. So that's the protocol. We need to, at some point, we will establish who can and cannot throw at the next person. So, you know, I hate to say that's just human nature. I just use a sports analog to say to basically bring the same point up.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I feel like, as much as code is law is something that's repeated all the time, we're still dealing with humans who are writing that code, and we're still dealing with human emotions, greed, whatever it may be. And I suppose, the power of community that comes along with that too. And I think that that's been exciting too when you think about the idea of a community-owned show, what you can unlock when you have kinds of all those different biases, different agendas come together, co-owned by people who might love Avalanche and might love other things, to say, look, this is kind of objective fact because the community's agreed that this is objective fact and this is kind of what the news should be. So that's kind of our model in all that. One of the community questions, though, from people who are co-owners of Coinage with us, I've been asking kind of what you see as the accelerator next year, looking ahead. I feel like as we've gone through these cycles, there have been things, and you mentioned them, like institutions coming in, a huge boost to the space. You can talk about the NFT communities that have been launched in all this, arguably a huge boost, depending on which projects. There's some out there that not so great. But ones that have delivered value to their communities obviously have a lot of people who have never touched crypto entering the space, totally new. So, I mean, when you look ahead to 2023, is there a catalyst there that you think might actually bring newcomers in, aside from those two?
Oh, so it's going to be stability in the crypto capital markets. That will invite new developers into the space, as opposed to existing developers in the space. It will invite new people, meaning enterprises who are traditional, to come into space. So we need to still rebuild trust in this space right now. And then the steps to build that trust really is new leadership, and you need regulation is coming. 2023 is going to be the year of regulation in crypto, whether we like it or not. And as soon as we get over that hurdle, you will have a lot of new participants. And lastly, the solution to regaining trust is not just in regulation. There is technology, and there are technologies being built to prevent misappropriation of money, et cetera, et cetera. I've talked about something called Enclave, which is a fully encrypted exchange. Full disclosure, the technology was incubated and built inside of Ava Labs, but it does have its own independent management today. It basically is a system where there's a second layer of security, and the actual information, customer funds, the trade data, and everything is secured and stored in a hardware device, an Intel SGX chip that prevents any third party from accessing, including the code itself, as well as the operator. So it's impossible for anyone to actually go hack the system or steal people's money. And then on top of that, another layer of protection built, because it's actually decentralized custody. It's not necessarily self-custody, but it's not centralized custody. So one entity can't just take your money and then start giving it to another entity, then go buy VC into whatever thing they want to buy. There's a group of people, testers, if you will, that will basically decide whether transactions are right or wrong, and if things can move around. So last part of that is technology will also improve the system, create trust. And I think this is all going to happen within the 2023 year.
Yeah, it's been tough to kind of break out that to a mainstream audience and explain, not everything in crypto failed here. It's, certain decisions that are made outside of the actual blockchains themselves, right? Nothing broke there. And I feel like it's the same thing that is covered when you're dealing with hacks and you're dealing with audiences that might not understand the nuances there. So that's...
And I sympathize with a TradFi or a Web2 enterprise type person to understand it, because, crypto and blockchain, it is not just a technology, it's a mindset. You have to really believe and want more decentralization. You have to really imbue the spirit of self-custody, or at least decentralized custody, and you have to think in a different way. You have to think, it's not that I am not just either an investor, a user, a developer, or on the board of directors. I can actually be all 4 or 5 of those things at one time. Internet 1.0 was internet of information, basically. It made it more efficient to get information. Internet of Web 2.0 was basically read-write. It was basically, I became a publisher on social media, and made it even easier with mobile. Web 3, obviously we all know, is the internet of value and transferring of value, but it is literally a whole leap in terms of mindset. And that's really part of the reason why it has so many doubters and haters, because to think of yourself as all 5 stakeholders that I just mentioned before, it's a really hard concept. They're more used to, I am just a Facebook user. I am just an equity owner of Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg and his developers build the product, and I'm not on the board of directors. Suddenly it's like, wait, no. You can have a voice in all 5 or 4 of those buckets if you want to.
Yeah, no, it's a lot to ask, and that's exactly right. I mean, like, I think about Coinage as an example there. It's like, yeah, you can smash that like button all you want, or you could subscribe on a YouTube channel, but do you really want to own the show? Do you want to influence where we go, what stories we cover, what projects we talk about? Buy an NFT and co-own this thing with us.
You don't have to. Maybe you just like to look at Zach Guzman and say, you know what? I want to be part of Coinage, but I just want to be a user. And I don't want, and the community is doing a great job of curating and suggesting the right type of people and the right content. So I love it just to be a user. It's a choice. The whole point is it gives you choice here.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. You can buy the NFT, you can join the cooperative, you can be as active as you want to be, but there will only ever be 9,000 Caucus NFTs to come into this community to join us. And that is kind of the idea, is that yes, there are memberships out there and you can use them however you want. But I do think it has been fascinating in terms of trying to explain some of the power of that, right? These new models are not easy to explain to people who don't understand crypto, as you said, who know what self-custody is, who know what any of these things mean. But I think that that's kind of where the power and where the value comes in, right? You talk about trust in crypto. I don't know about you, but I feel like when you're talking to friends and trying to get them to understand those ideals, and see kind of the headlines of 2022, it becomes rather difficult to get anyone to kind of join you in this space. I mean, how long do you think that overhang is going to be there? One of the other questions is, how long does crypto winter last, right? And where do prices start to go? And I know that's kind of impossible for you to predict, but when you piece kind of the details together and you've seen these waves before, I mean, what are kind of things maybe for people to watch for to say, all right, nature's healing, crypto's re-healing here, and things are moving in the right direction?
So I guess we have to somewhat separate development building from asset prices. So from the asset prices side, any security, any asset, any commodity, any currency, and crypto included, there's always 3 things that dictate those prices. One is the macro environment, one is how much liquidity there is in space, and then one is the individual fundamentals of that particular thing. So the crypto people can really only control literally the fundamentals of the projects, and hopefully the Genesis and Binance and the other places don't have any other issues, so liquidity comes back to the system. The macro we cannot predict. So if you're asking me for a date, from the asset prices, I think sometime in 2023 you'll see things. We're already starting a bottoming process, frankly. But in sometimes 2023, you're not going to, just like in the previous cycle, yes, you had the sharp cliff dive in 14, and then you had a little spike and bump, but 15, 16 was like this before 17 went straight up. So I see a similar pattern where the bottoming process starts. Hopefully there's no other, the caveat is hopefully there's no other big blow-ups. You see this bottoming pattern happening already. And if the macro environment gets better, liquidity comes in back to the market. I know for sure, not just at Ava Labs, but a lot of these other places, the fundamentals of these individual projects and continue to build and innovate is happening. Then you will have these little moves up, and then when the right environment happens, you get the next cycle, the super up into the right action. That's the pricing side. On the development side, there's no doubt that new developers, new enterprises who want to build on top of blockchains is taking somewhat, I would call it a pause or more hesitancy. But reality is that has not taken that much of a hit. They are still interested in, they may have slowed it down, but they are still doing things, and that will continue to grow. So the great thing about this is in the next cycle, there's going to be more utility and not just native utility. And the prices will be driven both from native utility, but as well as crossover utility in traditional Web 2.
Well, I don't think you give yourself enough credit, John, and we're going to wrap the spaces here because I feel like, you're one of the leaders in crypto that is a professional, a consummate professional when it comes to bridging the gap between, the old traditional finance world. You speak their language, but you also speak the language in terms of respect in the crypto community and really not judging any books by the cover. It's something I've enjoyed, in our conversations. And to get to say that you're a Coinage community member, one of our NFT holders, honestly, really, it is an honor. And I'm excited that we've had your support to kind of get off the ground here. And thank you for giving us the time to chat about all this stuff. I hope a lot of people in the space has learned a lot about what's coming here in 2023 and what you guys have done in 2022 as builders in a rather tough industry right now. No bones about it. But I really do appreciate everything that you've done for us to kind of get off the ground and to let people co-own this show with us as we launch our giveaway with our mint open now at coinage.media. But thanks again, man. I don't know if there's one thing you want to say here to wrap up as we end the space. I know you got to jump, but really all I can say is thank you.
I think it's very exciting to be at, participating in Coinage. I think everyone in the spaces should participate because this is literally unique right now. And very few new media can say that they've done what you guys are doing right now. And I think there's a lot of great things happening at Ava Labs Avalanche. I'm very excited for 2023. 2022, listen, let's all be honest. No one likes down prices even if there's more building. But 2023, the healing process has already started or bottoming, and 2023 is going to be a lot better than 2022. So everyone who's a real believer in Web3, great. If you're not a real believer in Web3, it's okay. But the good times are coming around.
All right, we'll end it there.